If you've ever bargain hunted for reloading gear on any of the online auction sites or garage sale sites, what have you, that aren't specific to outdoor gear, you've likely seen a fair variety of different implements advertised as being reloading presses when in fact they actually aren't. And some of the most common ones are the little brackets that you'd mount a handheld drill in and they turn your drill into a little drill press. Those are pretty commonly misidentified as a piece of reloading equipment. Sometimes you'll see arbor presses, like this 10-ton press here, called a reloading press, and actually this one's been modified by myself to be reloading equipment. But a lot of times you'll see just regular presses, arbor presses, called a reloading press. Of course there are arbor style reloading presses, but you'll see these fairly often. And one of the more common ones is actually bottle capping presses that are used for folks that make their own beverages, rebottle their own beverages, to add a cap on the top of your bottle. And so likely you've seen some of those. Let me move this one out of the way here real quick. Ugh. Call it 10-ton press because that's approximately how much it weighs. I think I hurt myself. Anyway, so how a bottle capping press works, or what a bottle capping press does, it's fairly similar to an actual reloading press. You have your empty cold snack holder. That came from Derek at Vice Grip Garage, and if you haven't subbed to that guy, you're missing out on a lot of quality car content, and he needs to trademark that phrase, otherwise I'm going to keep ripping it off, and at least if he trademarks it, I'll send him some money or something. But anyway, check him out. But so you have your empty container here, you refill. Mine's half full with primers because I don't know, I needed something to put in there. You'd place your cap on the top of here and then use a press to cap that on there, similar to seating a bullet, right? So it's very, very similar function. So imagine my surprise when I was browsing through one of those online auction sites and I see a reloading press advertised, and I scrolled right by it because all appearances it's bottle capper. That's what it looks like in the little tiny thumbnail I see on my phone. But I actually scrolled back up pretty quick because it's obviously not a bottle capper. This here started its life as a sci-fill bottle capper, and somebody with a lot of time on their hands modified it into an actual reloading press. I'll get you in here closer and all the details here in just a second. But what they did is pretty impressive, and this is set up for 38 special. As far as I can tell, the casings all fit. The dies aren't marked at all, but the casings fit in the little shell holders and they actually go into the dies rather nicely, so I assume that it was for 38 special. And that kind of seems like the caliber that a guy with this much time on his hands would have. Somebody that shoots 38 special or 45, it's not like you'd see somebody tinkering around with one of these for a real fast Magnum caliber or something. This was a retired guy that had a lot of time on his hands and liked to spend it out in the garage. So this is pretty neat. I'm gonna break down kind of each operation here for you real quick and show you the real in close shots of what's actually going on here. So with any reloading operation, the first step of reloading is to take your fired brass and you got to size it down and deprime it. And so on the back side of this, there's provision for that. Shell holder, there's a hole that goes all the way through here. I'll pull this out real quick, show you this block in the sizing decapping station. Raise this all the way up, this comes out. So there's a steel block with a steel shell holder and a little brass spacer on it. This has a hole all the way through with this stem on the bottom, and then there's a nut that holds it on this main block. So set that back in there, tighten that in there. And what we have for a depriming sizing die is a Lyman 310 style. It's the 5/8 thread. It's not your normal size die, it's the smaller diameter. One of the Lyman style dies that's been modified, and I'm going to pull that out of there real quick too. So there's a nut on the bottom. That die just slips right out of there, and then there's a little set screw in this brass cap on top. If you pull that out, then the whole sizing stem and depriming rod comes out of there. This is actually just a piece of wire that somebody's put in there. It's been all bent up, and so it doesn't work real well for depriming, but if I find an actual size depriming rod, or a pin, I can put that in there. So that all goes back together. Tighten that down. So there's a little brass cap that's been soldered onto the lock ring on this Lyman die. So we can set that back in there and put our nut back on the bottom. So I have a piece of 38 special brass. This one's already been deprimed. This little piece of wire doesn't work real well anymore, but if I place that into the station and crank the lever down, it would knock that primer out the bottom, and it would fall out the bottom of this block. And there's resistance on there. You can feel it sizing that brass down. Pull it back up, and there would be your deprimed and resized piece of brass. Now if we move to the other side of the press over here, this is where you would prime and then seat your bullet. One thing this doesn't have is any provision for an expander to expand your case out to accept a lead bullet. So I don't know if they just didn't do that or if they did that off the press some other device. I don't know. But this is really cool here. So somebody actually made, I'm assuming they made, because I've never seen anything like this before, a homemade primer slide. It's all made out of brass. Got a spring on the bottom here, so it's spring loaded, so you'd pull it back. The primer would fall down from the tube. As you push it forward, it pushes it into the shell holder, and underneath here there's a priming rod. It's captive by a nut and it's spring tensioned, and that would hold it from falling out the bottom. But as I crank the handle up, it would push a primer up and seat it into the case. It looks like they had some sort of primer tube that would fit on top of here. I can't find anything in my stash that fits exactly in there. There must have been a little nub off of it that would come off and lock into there to hold your primers. And I actually have tried dropping a few dead primers down here and trying to get them feed, and I don't have this set quite right apparently, because I can't actually get them feed through there. But the mechanism is really slick, made out of brass there. So let's go through the motions again here. So if I was to prime, put my casing in there, pull the slide back, let it go, it would push a primer down in there. I would crank the handle one direction to seat the primer, take it out, add my powder, set my bullet on top, and then crank the handle the other direction to bring the seating die down on top and seat the bullet. On this side you can see there's a rod, a threaded rod with a set screw, and this is how you can set the extreme travel of the press. If I take the case out of here, it'll come down and contact that. And of course you can set your seating depth by just adjusting the top of the seater die. And again, this is a Lyman 310 style, the 5/8 diameter reloading die here. So that's kind of the general operation of this as near as I can figure it out. Pretty intuitive, right, if you've run any reloading presses at all. So that's not really the thing that's impressive to me about this. When I look at the construction, somebody put a lot of hours into not only thinking this through, but actually building this. The first thing I want to point out is all the little brass components on here. So this primer slide is made up of, I think, 4 different layers of brass sandwiched together by just these tiny little flathead screws. And that carries all the way over into this spacer with a shell holder on it. And then this primer tube holder here is soldered onto the top of there. Over here there's a little brass spacer on the depriming size inside. There's a little brass shelf here, and then there's a brass spacer on top of this die block where it connects to the original head of the press, and then this brass sleeve around the sizing depriming die over here. So somebody had access to some brass. Oh, I also forgot, each one of these holes that has a rod that slides through it has a brass sleeve insert in those. That's pretty neat that they did that, to think about the wear points of the rods traveling through there. The other interesting thing is if you look at this top, I'll call it the die head, I guess, there was a lot of machining cuts on this. I can't even begin to think about how long it would have taken to machine this out. And it's obvious that there were some hand tools used. There's a few rough spaces, but a lot of it would have had to have been done on a mill. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of cuts in the horizontal plane. There's at least 3 different cuts in a vertical plane. Out here where this rod extends through, it's been rounded out. It's been stepped in here. It's rounded around the backside. There's 1, 2, 3 set screw holes drilled into this. There's a vertical threaded hole for this travel rod here. This seating die has been threaded vertically. The depriming one, priming die, that's actually not a threaded hole on this side. It just sets in there, but the amount of time it would have taken to machine this block here, it just blows my mind. It's incredible. The bottom block here where the shell holders set and the primer assembly sets, a little less complicated, but still there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertical holes drilled through there, all in the appropriate planes. There's 3 horizontal holes, actually 4, because there's one that holds the whole priming assembly in there. It's been split on the back here so it clamps around the post. Again, somebody spent a lot of time thinking this through. I really wish that I knew the history behind this piece. I actually did reach out to the seller and they didn't know anything about it. I think they were kind of an antique reseller. They kind of guessed at what it was, but they really didn't have any idea. And I can't fault them for that. Somebody probably dropped it off in a big box of junk that they cleaned out of their grandparents' house or something. But I'm really glad that this didn't make it into the landfill. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of these kind of shop-built projects, they live and die with their creators, right? So likely some older gentleman built this. Who knows? Maybe he's a retired machinist. Obviously had some sort of mechanical skills. More than likely, when he no longer used it, maybe it passed on. I don't know, but family or somebody cleaning up his legacy they didn't have any need for it. There wasn't any connection to family. Nobody really, latched onto it, and it got moved into stuff that was eventually resold. And I'm really bummed that I don't know the history on it. It's if this was something that was created in my family, I would love to have it. But that said, I'm glad it didn't get thrown in a dumpster. That seems to be, unfortunately, what happens to a lot of these homemade projects. Family doesn't have any interest in it. Nobody really knows what it is. They, do a quick Google search and they don't see anything like it, and so it just gets pitched. And I hate to think about how many projects have just gotten scrapped because of that. Nobody really knew what it was, and nobody had any interest in it. This is probably my favorite piece in my collection right now. Not because it's a super high dollar item, but because it's obvious somebody had a real passion for doing this, not only for reloading, but machining, creating. It's just fascinating to me. I'm really glad I found it. I do have a couple other homemade or shop built reloading presses. Can't wait to drag those out and show you guys. But by far, this is the most sophisticated and most interesting one that I have. So hope you guys enjoy this. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have anything like this, I would love to see it. I'm just fascinated by the homemade presses. And maybe if this was something you saw in your grandpa's shop, let me know. Stranger things have happened. I'd love to reconnect with somebody that's actually knows something about this. So I'm gonna take some detailed pictures of this, add them to the end of the video, and if anybody wants to see anything else about it, please let me know. But again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I do want to set this aside real quick. Bring out this press here. If you watched my kind of channel or series intro video, I showed this one. This is a Schmitt Model 12, and I think this is probably my oldest press that I have, and it also is mechanically complicated. The brainchild of somebody that put a lot of thought into this. This is going to be my next video talking about this one, so stay tuned. Coming up next. Thank you.